The roar of the bulldozer engine cut through the crisp morning air as I maneuvered the massive machine down Pinecrest Drive, shoving aside the debris that had accumulated from last night's catastrophic ice storm. And I knew that somewhere in one of these pristine suburban homes, someone was already dialing 911 to complain about the noise. My name is Marcus Vance, and I run a commercial excavation and emergency road clearing service based out of Asheville, North Carolina. The storm that hit us 12 hours ago was unlike anything I had seen in my 15 years of business. Trees were down everywhere. Power lines hung like deadly spider webs across the streets, and thick sheets of ice had turned the mountain roads into skating rinks. When emergency services called me at 4 in the morning, I did not hesitate. Lives were at stake, and I had both the equipment and the expertise to help. The subdivision of Maple Heights sat on the eastern side of Asheville, a collection of cookie-cutter homes that had sprouted up about 5 years ago. Each house looked almost identical to the next, with their beige siding and dark brown trim, their 2-car garages and their perfectly manicured lawns. Under normal circumstances, it was the kind of neighborhood where nothing exciting ever happened. But these were not normal circumstances. A massive oak tree had fallen across Pinecrest Drive, the main artery into and out of the subdivision. According to the fire chief, there was an elderly woman on Oakmont Circle who needed immediate medical attention, and the ambulance could not get through with that tree blocking the way. So here I was, doing what I do best, clearing a path so that emergency responders could do their job. I had been working for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed her. She came storming out of a house about 50 yards down the road, wearing a purple bathrobe and fuzzy slippers that had no business being worn on ice-covered pavement. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and even from this distance, I could see the fury written across her face. She was waving her arms like she was trying to flag down a rescue plane, and she was shouting something I could not hear over the roar of the bulldozer. I killed the engine and climbed down from the cab. The sudden silence was almost jarring. "Excuse me." The woman shrieked as she carefully made her way toward me, her slippers sliding on the ice with every step. "Excuse me. What do you think you are doing?" I grabbed my hard hat and work gloves from the cab, taking a moment to assess the situation. The woman looked to be in her mid-40s, with the kind of pinched expression that suggested she spent most of her time looking for things to complain about. "Madam, I am clearing the road," I said, keeping my voice level and professional. "There is a medical emergency in the subdivision, and the ambulance cannot get through." She stopped about 10 feet away from me, one hand on her hip and the other pointing an accusatory finger in my direction. "I do not care what you think you are doing. You do not have permission from the Homeowners Association to operate heavy machinery in this neighborhood. This is a violation of at least 6 different covenants." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that staying calm was the best way to handle people like this. "Madam, as I said, there is a medical emergency. Emergency services called me directly. I am working with the fire department and EMS to clear a path so they can reach someone who needs help." "I do not care if the president himself called you," she snapped back. "You are in violation of HOA regulations, and I am calling the police right now." She pulled out her phone and started jabbing at the screen with her manicured fingernails. I could not believe what I was hearing. Someone in this very neighborhood needed medical help, possibly life-saving treatment, and this woman was more concerned about HOA bylaws. "Listen," I said, taking a step toward her. "I understand you have rules here, but right now, someone's life is more important than your covenants. Once I clear this tree, the ambulance can get through, and then I will be out of your hair." She held up one finger to silence me while she pressed the phone to her ear. Yes, hello. I need to report illegal construction activity in Maple Heights subdivision. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. No, this is not a non-emergency call. This man has brought heavy machinery into our neighborhood without permission, and he is tearing up our roads. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Behind me, I could hear the crackle of my radio. That would be the fire chief wondering why I had stopped working. The longer this woman delayed me, the longer that elderly woman on Oakmont Circle had to wait for help. Madam, I tried again, please, just let me finish this job. You can report me to your HOA later, you can file a complaint, whatever you want. But right now, I need to clear this road. She ignored me completely, continuing her conversation with what I assumed was a very confused 911 operator. Yes, I am president of the Maple Heights HOA. My name is Patricia Donnelly, and I am telling you that this man is in violation of multiple neighborhood ordinances. Patricia Donnelly. Of course her name was Patricia. It was always a Patricia or a Sharon or a Susan. Women with that particular entitled edge, who seemed to derive all their power from their position in the HOA. I walked back to the Bulldozer and grabbed my radio. Marcus to base, do you copy? The radio crackled to life. This is Chief Morrison. Go ahead, Marcus. Chief, I have got a situation here. The HOA president just showed up and she is calling the cops on me, says I am violating neighborhood rules. There was a long pause, and then I heard Chief Morrison's exasperated sigh come through the speaker. You have got to be kidding me. Does she understand this is a medical emergency? I tried to explain that, Chief. She does not seem to care. Hold tight, Marcus. I am going to make some calls. In the meantime, keep working. You have full authorization from emergency services, and that supersedes any HOA nonsense. Copy that, Chief. I hung the radio back on my belt and turned to find Patricia glaring at me with her arms crossed. I heard that, she said. And I am telling you right now, if you start that machine again, I will make sure you are arrested for trespassing, destruction of property, and disturbing the peace. Something inside me snapped. I had been up since 4 in the morning. I had driven through treacherous conditions to get here, and I was trying to help save someone's life. I was not about to let some power-hungry HOA president stop me from doing my job. Madam, I said, and my voice had an edge to it now. I am going to get back in that bulldozer and I am going to finish clearing this road. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with your lawyer, your HOA board, or anyone else you want. But right now, I have work to do. Her face turned red, the color creeping up from her neck like a thermometer rising. How dare you speak to me that way? Do you have any idea who I am? You are the HOA president, I said flatly. You made that very clear. Now if you will excuse me. I climbed back into the cab of the bulldozer and fired up the engine. Through the windshield, I could see Patricia's mouth moving, but I could not hear what she was saying over the roar of the machine. She pulled out her phone again, presumably to make another call, and then she did something that made my blood run cold. She stepped directly in front of the bulldozer. I immediately killed the engine and leaned out of the cab. Are you insane? Get out of the way. Not until you shut down this operation and leave our neighborhood, she shouted back. This was beyond absurd. This woman was literally putting herself in danger, and for what? To prove a point about HOA regulations. I pulled out my phone and took a quick photo of her standing in front of the bulldozer. If this escalated any further, I wanted documentation of exactly what was happening. That was when I heard the sirens. 2 police cruisers came sliding carefully down the icy road, their lights flashing red and blue against the gray morning sky. Patricia's face lit up with triumphant satisfaction. "Now you are going to see what happens when you break the rules in my neighborhood," she said. The police cars came to a stop about 30 feet away, and two officers got out. The first was a tall, broad-shouldered man who looked to be in his late 30s. His name tag read Officer Reynolds. The second was a younger woman, probably mid-20s, whose tag identified her as Officer Chen. "All right, what is going on here?" Officer Reynolds asked as he approached. Patricia rushed toward them before I could say anything. "Officers, thank goodness you are here. This man has brought unauthorized construction equipment into our neighborhood and he is refusing to leave. I have told him multiple times that he is in violation of our HOA covenants, but he will not listen." Officer Reynolds looked from Patricia to me, then to the massive oak tree that was still blocking most of the road. "And you are?" he asked, directing the question at me. "Marcus Vance," I said, climbing down from the cab. "I own Vance Excavation and Emergency Services. I was called by the fire department to clear this road so an ambulance can get through. There is a woman on Oakmont Circle who needs medical attention." Officer Chen walked over to examine the fallen tree. "This came down in the storm last night." "Yes, madam," I confirmed. "The fire chief contacted me at around 4 this morning. I have been working to clear it since about 6. Officer Reynolds pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, can you confirm if there is an active medical emergency at Maple Heights subdivision?" The radio crackled. "Affirmative, Officer Reynolds. We have an ambulance standing by at the entrance to the subdivision, waiting for road clearance to reach a patient on Oakmont Circle." Patricia's confident expression faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "That does not change the fact that he did not get permission from the HOA. We have procedures for these things." Officer Reynolds turned to look at her, and I could see the irritation in his eyes. "Madam, in case of emergency operations, HOA regulations do not supersede the need for emergency access. This gentleman has every right to be here clearing this road." "But the noise ordinance," Patricia protested. "He started before 7 in the morning. That is a clear violation." "Noise ordinances also do not apply to emergency operations," Officer Chen said, walking back over to join her partner. "Madam, I am going to have to ask you to step aside and let Mr. Vance finish his work." Patricia's face was turning red again. "I am the president of this HOA, and I am telling you that this is not acceptable. I want him removed from the premises immediately." Officer Reynolds took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his patience. "Madam, if you continue to interfere with emergency operations, I am going to have to cite you for obstruction." "Obstruction?" Patricia's voice went up an octave. "I am not obstructing anything. I am protecting my neighborhood." "You are standing in front of a bulldozer that is trying to clear a path for an ambulance," Officer Chen pointed out. "That is pretty much the definition of obstruction." I almost felt sorry for Patricia. Almost. She clearly had no idea how out of line she was, how completely inappropriate her behavior was in this situation. She had built her entire identity around being the HOA president, and now that authority was being challenged, she could not handle it. "I want to speak to your supervisor," Patricia demanded. "Right now." Officer Reynolds reached for his radio again, but before he could say anything, another vehicle came sliding carefully down the road. This one was a red SUV with Asheville Fire Department Chief printed on the side. Chief Morrison himself had come to the scene. The chief was a stocky man in his 50s, with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude that came from decades of dealing with emergencies. He got out of his vehicle and surveyed the scene with a single sweeping glance. "What is the holdup?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "This woman," Officer Reynolds said, gesturing to Patricia, is refusing to let Mr. Vance continue his work. She claims it is an HOA violation. Chief Morrison's jaw clenched. He walked over to Patricia, and when he spoke, his voice was controlled but clearly angry. Madam, are you aware that while you are standing here arguing about neighborhood covenants, there is a 78-year-old woman named Dorothy Mitchell who is having a cardiac event? Are you aware that every minute we waste is a minute closer to her dying? Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I did not know it was that serious, she finally said, her voice much smaller now. It does not matter how serious it is, Chief Morrison continued. When emergency services gives the authorization for road clearing, that authorization comes with the full weight of city, county, and state emergency management laws. Your HOA rules mean absolutely nothing in this context. Now, you have two choices. You can step aside and let Mr. Vance do his job, or you can continue to obstruct, in which case these officers will arrest you. What is it going to be? For the first time since this whole situation started, Patricia looked genuinely uncertain. She glanced at the police officers, then at me, then at the fire chief. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. I am just trying to maintain the standards of our neighborhood, she said weakly. And I am trying to save a woman's life, Chief Morrison shot back. Priorities, madam. Now move. Patricia stepped aside, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. Whether they were from frustration, embarrassment, or genuine remorse, I could not tell and did not particularly care. I nodded to the chief and climbed back into the bulldozer. The next 20 minutes were focused and intense. I worked the controls with precision, pushing aside the massive trunk of the oak tree, clearing branches and debris, creating a path wide enough for the ambulance to get through. Chief Morrison stayed on scene, directing me and coordinating with his team. The police officers remained as well, presumably to make sure Patricia did not try anything else. When I finally cleared the last of the obstruction, Chief Morrison gave me a thumbs up and immediately got on his radio. Ambulance, you are clear to proceed. Road is open. I could hear the siren before I saw it. The ambulance came through carefully but quickly, navigating the icy road with expert precision. As it passed, one of the paramedics gave me a wave through the window. That simple gesture made all of this worthwhile. I shut down the bulldozer and climbed out, my muscles aching from the tension and concentration. Chief Morrison walked over and extended his hand. Good work, Marcus, he said. You may have just saved Dorothy's life. Just doing my job, Chief, I replied, shaking his hand. Officer Reynolds approached as well. Mr. Vance, we are going to need a statement from you about what happened here this morning. Nothing major, just for the record. Of course, I said. I glanced around and noticed that Patricia had retreated to her house. Her front door was closed, but I could see her silhouette in the window, watching. What happens with her? I asked, nodding toward the house. Officer Reynolds shrugged. Technically, she did obstruct an emergency operation. We could cite her for that. But given that no real harm was done and the situation is resolved, I am inclined to let it go with a warning. Unless you want to press charges. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to see Patricia face some consequences for her actions. She had put her petty concerns about HOA rules above someone's life. That was not something that should be taken lightly. But another part of me, the part that was just tired and wanted to get on with my day, saw no point in escalating things further. No charges, I said. But I do want this documented, just in case she tries to come after me later with the HOA. Smart thinking, Officer Chen said. We will file a full report. If she gives you any trouble, you will have official documentation showing that you were here at the request of emergency services, and that she was the one who interfered. I gave them my statement, which took another 15 minutes or so. By the time we were done, more residents had started emerging from their homes, curious about all the commotion. A few of them came over to ask what had happened, and I explained the situation as briefly as possible. Most people were understanding and even grateful that I had cleared the road so quickly. A man named Robert from 3 houses down shook my hand and thanked me. A woman named Jennifer brought me a cup of coffee, which I accepted gratefully. But I also noticed a few people who seemed to side with Patricia, giving me suspicious looks and muttering to each other. That was the thing about HOAs. They created this insular culture where the rules of the neighborhood became more important than common sense or human decency. People got so caught up in maintaining property values and enforcing covenants that they forgot about being good neighbors. Chief Morrison left after making sure the ambulance had reached Dorothy safely. The police officers departed shortly after, with Officer Reynolds reminding me one more time that I had the full support of the law if Patricia tried anything else. I spent the next hour cleaning up the debris as best I could, pushing the tree segments to the side of the road where the city crew could collect them later. It was not part of my original job, but it felt like the right thing to do. The ice was starting to melt as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, making the cleanup work a bit easier. I was just finishing up when a car pulled up beside me. It was a silver Honda sedan, and the woman driving it looked to be in her early 60s. She rolled down her window and I walked over. "Are you the man who cleared the road?" she asked. "Yes, madam," I replied, her eyes filled with tears. "Dorothy Mitchell is my sister. The paramedics said that if they had been delayed even 10 more minutes, she might not have made it. I just wanted to thank you." My throat tightened. "Is she going to be okay?" "They think so," the woman said, wiping at her eyes. "They got her stabilized and she is at the hospital now, but the doctors said timing was everything, so thank you so much." "I am glad I could help," I said. She reached out and squeezed my hand through the window, then drove off carefully down the now clear road. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the morning settle over me. This was why I did what I did. Not for the money, although the pay was decent. Not for the thrill of operating heavy machinery, although I did enjoy that. But for moments like this, when my work actually made a difference in someone's life. I was loading my equipment back onto the trailer when I saw Patricia emerge from her house again. This time she was dressed in actual clothes, a navy blue pantsuit that screamed HOA president. She walked toward me with purpose and I braced myself for round 2. "Mr. Vance," she said as she approached. Her tone was different now, less aggressive but still formal. "Mrs. Donnelly," I replied evenly. She stopped a few feet away from me, her arms crossed. "I want you to know that I will be bringing this incident up at the next HOA board meeting. What happened here this morning was unacceptable, and there need to be procedures put in place to prevent this kind of disruption in the future." I stared at her in disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious," she said. "This neighborhood has rules for a reason. If we start making exceptions, even for so-called emergencies, then what is the point of having rules at all?" I set down the chain I had been coiling and walked over to her. "Mrs. Donnelly, do you understand that a woman nearly died this morning? Do you understand that your interference could have cost Dorothy her life?" "That is not my fault," Patricia said defensively. "I did not create the emergency. I was simply trying to maintain order in my neighborhood." "Your neighborhood," I repeated. "You do realize you do not actually own this entire subdivision, right? You are just the president of the HOA. You are not a mayor. You are not a governor. You are just someone who volunteered to enforce some neighborhood rules." her face flushed. I take my responsibilities very seriously. Maybe you should take being a decent human being more seriously, I shot back. I immediately regretted the words. I usually try to stay professional, even in frustrating situations. But this woman had pushed me past my limit. She was standing here after everything that had happened, still insisting that she was right. I do not have to listen to this, Patricia said, turning to leave. Wait, I called after her. She stopped and looked back at me. I am sorry, I said. That was out of line. But please, just think about what happened here today. Really think about it. Someone needed help and I was able to provide that help. Is that really something worth fighting against? Patricia's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I thought I might have actually gotten through to her. But then her face hardened again. The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Vance. Good day. She walked back to her house, her heels clicking on the pavement. I watched her go, shaking my head in amazement. Some people simply could not be reached. I finished loading my equipment and was preparing to leave when another car pulled up. This one was a black pickup truck, and the man who got out was tall and lean, probably in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a friendly face. You must be Marcus Vance, he said, extending his hand. I am Daniel Morton. I am on the HOA board here at Maple Heights. I shook his hand cautiously. If you are here to yell at me about violating covenants, I have already heard it. Daniel laughed. No, nothing like that. I actually wanted to apologize for Patricia's behavior this morning. I heard about what happened and I am mortified. That is not how we want to represent this community. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely surprised. Look, Patricia means well, but she can be a bit overzealous, Daniel continued. She takes the HOA rules very seriously, maybe too seriously. But what she did this morning was out of line, and I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with her approach. That is good to hear, I said. In fact, I am going to call an emergency board meeting for this evening, Daniel said. We need to discuss what happened and make sure we have proper procedures in place for emergency situations. I do not want something like this happening again. I nodded. That sounds like a good plan. For what it is worth, I understand that HOAs have rules for a reason. I just think there needs to be some common sense applied, especially when lives are at stake. Completely agree, Daniel said. And again, I am sorry you had to deal with this. You were doing a good thing helping people and you should not have been harassed for it. We talked for a few more minutes, and I gave him my contact information in case the board had any questions or needed any clarification about what happened. Daniel seemed like a reasonable guy, the kind of person who understood that rules were important but not more important than people. As I drove away from Maple Heights, I felt exhausted but satisfied. The job was done, Dorothy was safe, and I had managed to navigate a ridiculous situation without losing my temper completely. Well, mostly without losing my temper. The rest of the day was a blur of other emergency calls. The ice storm had created chaos throughout Asheville, and my services were in high demand. I cleared fallen trees from 3 other roads, helped the power company access some downed lines, and assisted in the evacuation of a small apartment building that had sustained structural damage. By the time I got home that evening, it was almost 9 o'clock. I lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy, just a comfortable place with a big garage where I could store some of my smaller equipment. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, collapsed on the couch, and turned on the news. The storm was the lead story, of course. The news anchors talked about the widespread damage, the power outages, the emergency response efforts. They interviewed Chief Morrison, who mentioned the successful rescue of Dorothy Mitchell and the hard work of emergency personnel and contractors who had worked throughout the day to clear roads and restore services. My phone rang just as I was about to doze off. I checked the caller ID and saw that it was Chief Morrison. "Hey, Chief," I answered. "Marcus, hope I am not calling too late," he said. "No, I am just watching the news coverage. Long day for everyone." That it was, Chief Morrison agreed. "Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. I got a call this afternoon from the city attorney's office. Apparently, your friend Patricia Donnelly filed a formal complaint against you, claiming property damage and illegal operation of construction equipment." I sat up straight, suddenly very awake. "You have got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," the chief said. "The city attorney is not taking it seriously, given the circumstances and the fact that we have multiple witnesses and official reports supporting your actions. But I wanted you to know that she is trying to cause trouble." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Nothing right now," Chief Morrison said. "The city attorney will handle it, but you might want to consider getting your own lawyer just in case she escalates this further. Some people just cannot let things go." We talked for a few more minutes, and the chief assured me again that I had done nothing wrong and that the city fully supported my actions. After we hung up, I sat on the couch, staring at the wall and trying to process this new development. Patricia was actually trying to get me in legal trouble for helping save someone's life. It was beyond petty. It was vindictive, and it made me angrier than I had been all day. I spent the next hour researching HOA law and emergency operations law, trying to understand exactly where I stood legally. The more I read, the more confident I became. Emergency services had full authority to authorize road clearing in situations like this, and HOA covenants explicitly could not interfere with emergency operations. Patricia did not have a leg to stand on, but that did not mean she could not make my life difficult. Even a frivolous lawsuit could cost me time and money. I made a note to call my insurance company in the morning and let them know about the situation. The next few days were relatively quiet. I continued to work various cleanup jobs around Asheville, helping the city recover from the ice storm. I did not hear anything more from Patricia or anyone else at Maple Heights, and I started to hope that maybe the whole situation would just blow over. Then, exactly 1 week after the incident, I received a certified letter. It was from the Maple Heights Homeowners Association, and it was addressed to me at my business address. I opened it with a sense of dread, and my suspicions were confirmed. It was a formal notice of violation, claiming that I had damaged HOA property, specifically the entrance road to the subdivision, and that I owed the HOA $3,000 in repair costs. The letter was signed by Patricia Donnelly in her capacity as HOA president, and it included a deadline for payment of 30 days. It also stated that if I did not pay, the HOA would pursue legal action. I immediately called my lawyer, a woman named Victoria Ellis, who had handled my business contracts and liability issues for years. Victoria was sharp, aggressive when she needed to be, and did not take nonsense from anyone. "Marcus," she said when she answered, "what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into this time?" I explained the whole situation, from the initial emergency call to Patricia's interference to this latest demand for payment. Victoria listened without interrupting, and I could almost hear her mind working through the details. "Okay," she said when I finished. "First things first, do not pay them anything. This is clearly a retaliatory action and they have no legal basis for these claims. Second, I need you to send me all the documentation you have. Photos, witness statements, police reports, everything. Third, I am going to draft a response to this letter that will make it very clear that if they continue this harassment, we will pursue legal action against them." Can we do that? I asked. Absolutely, Victoria said. What this Patricia woman is doing could be considered harassment, abuse of power, and possibly even extortion. She is using her position in the HOA to pursue a personal vendetta, and that is not legal. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you, Victoria. I was worried this might turn into a huge mess. It might, she said honestly, but we will be ready for it. Send me everything by tomorrow and I will have a response letter drafted by the end of the week. True to her word, Victoria worked quickly. Within 3 days, she had prepared a comprehensive response to the HOA's letter. She sent me a copy before mailing it, and I had to admit, it was impressive. The letter laid out in precise legal language exactly why the HOA's claims were baseless, cited multiple laws and precedents supporting my actions, and ended with a warning that any further harassment would result in a countersuit. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received another letter, this time from a law firm representing the Maple Heights HOA. They were doubling down on their claims and had now added additional charges including unauthorized commercial activity and violation of quiet enjoyment. Victoria was furious when I forwarded her the letter. "These people are insane," she said during our phone call. "They are just making things up now. Unauthorized commercial activity. You were there at the request of emergency services. Violation of quiet enjoyment during an emergency operation. This is ridiculous." "So what do?" I asked. "We sue them," Victoria said simply. "We file a civil suit for harassment, abuse of process, and defamation. We go after not just the HOA but Patricia Donnelly personally for misuse of her authority. And we make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here." I hesitated. "That seems like it might be overkill. Marcus, these people tried to stop you from helping save a woman's life, and now they are trying to extort money from you and ruin your business reputation. This is not overkill. This is what needs to happen to stop people like Patricia from abusing their power." She had a point, and honestly, I was tired of being pushed around by someone who thought that being HOA president gave her unlimited authority. "All right," I said. "Let's do it." Victoria filed the lawsuit the following week. We sued the Maple Heights HOA for $10,000 in damages, and we named Patricia Donnelly as a co-defendant for her personal actions in obstructing emergency operations and subsequent harassment. The lawsuit became something of a local news story. The Asheville Citizen-Times ran an article with the headline, "Local Contractor Sues HOA After Being Harassed for Emergency Road Clearing." The article laid out the facts of the case, included quotes from Chief Morrison supporting my actions, and mentioned Dorothy Mitchell's successful recovery. The response was overwhelmingly in my favor. People were outraged that an HOA president had tried to stop an emergency operation and was now harassing the person who had helped save someone's life. The comments section on the online article was filled with stories of other HOA horror stories and calls for reform. Patricia, for her part, seemed to double down. She gave an interview to the same newspaper, claiming that I was the one in the wrong and that she was simply trying to protect her neighborhood. She insisted that there were proper procedures that should have been followed and that emergency or not, rules were rules. The interview did not help her case. If anything, it made her look even worse. People could not believe that someone could be so rigid and unfeeling. About a month after we filed the lawsuit, Victoria called me with an update. "You are not going to believe this," she said. "Patricia's lawyers want to settle." "Really?" I was surprised. Patricia had seemed so determined to fight. "Apparently, the other members of the HOA board are not happy with how this has gone down," Victoria explained. They are worried about the legal costs and the bad publicity. They want to settle for your actual costs plus a public apology. What about Patricia? I asked. That is the interesting part, Victoria said. The board has apparently voted to remove her as president. They are also requiring her to personally apologize as part of the settlement. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to push forward with the lawsuit to make sure Patricia faced real consequences for her actions. But another part of me just wanted this whole thing to be over so I could get back to my normal life. What do you think I should do? I asked Victoria. Honestly, I think the settlement is fair, she said. You get compensated for your time and legal fees. Patricia loses her position of power, and the whole thing gets resolved without dragging on for months in court. Plus, the public apology will be good for your business reputation. All right, I said. Let's accept the settlement. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. The HOA agreed to pay me $12,000 to cover my legal costs and time spent dealing with the situation. Patricia was required to issue a public apology, which she did through a letter published in the same newspaper where she had given her interview. The apology was stiff and clearly written by lawyers, but it acknowledged that she had been wrong to interfere with emergency operations, and that her subsequent actions in pursuing legal action against me were inappropriate. She also resigned from her position as HOA president. The new HOA board, led by Daniel Morton, issued a statement as well. They apologized for the situation, established new guidelines for how the association would handle emergency situations in the future, and promised to work toward being a more community-focused organization. I met with Daniel one afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Asheville. He wanted to personally make sure there were no hard feelings and to show me the new emergency procedures the board had approved. We have established a direct communication line with the city's emergency services department, he explained, showing me a document on his tablet. If there is ever another situation where emergency operations need to access our neighborhood, the city can contact a designated board member immediately. That person has the authority to grant immediate access without having to go through normal HOA approval processes. That sounds like a much better system, I said. It is what should have been in place from the beginning, Daniel admitted. Patricia's approach to running the HOA was always a bit heavy-handed, but most of us did not realize how bad it had gotten until this happened. We are trying to make changes, to focus less on enforcement and more on actually building a good community. I am glad to hear it, I said. And for what it is worth, I think most HOAs are probably fine. It is just when you get someone in charge who cares more about power than people that things go wrong. Daniel nodded. That is exactly what happened here, and we are going to make sure it does not happen again. We talked for a while longer, and Daniel even mentioned that the HOA was planning to give Dorothy Mitchell a Community Service Award for being a beloved member of the neighborhood. It was a nice gesture, and it showed that the new board was trying to get things back on track. Life slowly returned to normal after that. The settlement money covered my legal fees with some left over, which I used to upgrade some of my equipment. My business actually saw a boost from all the publicity, with several new clients reaching out because they had heard about what happened and wanted to work with someone who put people before profit. I occasionally drove past Maple Heights when I had jobs in that area of town. The neighborhood looked the same as always, with its neat rows of houses and well-maintained lawns. But I like to think that something had changed beneath the surface, that maybe people had learned something from the whole experience. About 3 months after everything was settled, I got a call from Dorothy Mitchell's sister. She invited me to a small gathering at Dorothy's house, a thank you party for everyone who had helped during her medical emergency. I almost declined. I did not need thanks or recognition for doing my job. But something made me accept the invitation. Maybe I wanted to see how Dorothy was doing. Maybe I just wanted some closure on the whole experience. The party was on a Saturday afternoon, and when I arrived at Dorothy's house on Oakmont Circle, I was surprised to see how many people were there. The house was filled with neighbors, family members, and a few emergency responders who had helped that morning. Dorothy herself was a small, cheerful woman with white hair and bright blue eyes. When her sister introduced us, she grabbed my hand and held it tight. "You are the man with the bulldozer," she said, her eyes welling up. "They told me what you did, how you cleared the road so the ambulance could get through. You saved my life." "I am just glad you are okay," I said, feeling a bit overwhelmed by her emotion. "More than okay," she said. "I am doing great. The doctors said I have a strong heart for my age, and I have good people around me." She gestured to the crowd of people in her home. "That is what matters, good people." I spent about an hour at the party, talking with various guests and enjoying some excellent homemade food. Chief Morrison was there, as were Officers Reynolds and Chen. Even Daniel Morton showed up with his wife. As I was getting ready to leave, Dorothy's sister pulled me aside. "I wanted you to know something," she said. After everything that happened with Patricia and the HOA, Dorothy was really upset. She felt like it was her fault that you had to go through all that trouble. "It was not her fault at all," I said quickly. "I know, and we told her that," the sister continued, "but she wanted to do something. So she went to every house in this neighborhood and collected signatures on a petition. The petition called for the HOA board to drop all actions against you and to implement better emergency procedures. She got over 100 signatures. I was stunned. I had no idea." "She did not want to make a big deal about it," the sister said. "But I thought you should know. That petition, along with all the public pressure, is what finally convinced the board to settle and make changes. Dorothy may be old, but she is a fighter." I looked across the room to where Dorothy was laughing with a group of neighbors. She caught my eye and gave me a little wave. "She is quite a woman," I said. "That she is," her sister agreed. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past few months. It had started as a simple emergency call, a routine job to clear a fallen tree. But it had turned into something much bigger, a battle against bureaucratic petness and misplaced priorities. In the end, though, good had prevailed. Patricia had lost her position of power and had been forced to acknowledge her mistakes. The HOA had implemented better procedures to prevent similar situations in the future. Dorothy had recovered and was thriving. And I had learned that sometimes standing up for what is right means fighting battles you never expected to fight. The whole experience also taught me something about communities and how they function. HOA, at their best, could help maintain property values and create pleasant living environments. But at their worst, they could become little fiefdoms where petty tyrants exercised power over their neighbors. The key, I realized, was balance. Rules were important, but they had to be applied with common sense and compassion. Authority was necessary, but it had to be tempered with humility and a genuine desire to serve the community. Several months later, I was invited to speak at a city council meeting about emergency response procedures and how neighborhoods could better coordinate with emergency services. I talked about my experience at Maple Heights, though I avoided mentioning Patricia by name. I focused instead on the lessons learned and the positive changes that had been implemented. The council was receptive, and they ended up passing a new ordinance that clarified the authority of emergency services personnel to access any area of the city during emergency operations, regardless of HOA or other local restrictions. It was a small victory, but an important one. I also started offering free training sessions for HOA board members throughout Asheville, helping them understand emergency procedures and how to balance their responsibilities to their communities with the need for flexibility during crisis situations. The sessions were well attended, and I got a lot of positive feedback from people who had never really thought about these issues before. Life moved on. Winter turned to spring, spring turned to summer. My business continued to thrive, and I took on a couple of new employees to help with the increased workload. I even started dating again, something I had not had much time for in recent years. But I never forgot about that morning in Maple Heights, standing in the cold with my bulldozer while Patricia Donnelly called the police on me for trying to save someone's life. It remained one of the most surreal experiences of my career, a perfect example of how disconnected some people could become from basic human values. I heard through the grapevine that Patricia had moved out of Maple Heights about 6 months after everything happened. Apparently, she could not handle the embarrassment and the way many of her neighbors now looked at her. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. She had made mistakes, serious mistakes, but she was still a human being who had to live with the consequences of her actions. Daniel Morton remained as HOA president, and by all accounts was doing an excellent job. The neighborhood had become more community-oriented, with regular social events, and a focus on actually getting to know neighbors rather than just enforcing rules against them. Dorothy Mitchell became something of a local celebrity, at least within the subdivision. She was known as the woman who had rallied the neighborhood against HOA overreach, and she used her newfound influence to advocate for other elderly residents and to promote community involvement. As for me, I continued doing what I had always done. I operated my equipment, I responded to emergency calls, and I tried to help people when they needed it. The Maple Heights incident had given me a higher profile, which brought more business, but it had also given me something more valuable, a reminder of why I did this work in the first place. 1 year to the day after the ice storm, I got a call from Daniel Morton. The Maple Heights HOA wanted to present me with a community service award at their annual meeting. I tried to decline, insisting that I had just been doing my job, but Daniel was persistent. "Marcus, this is important for the community," he said. "It is a chance for us to acknowledge what happened, to show that we have learned from our mistakes, and to thank someone who put his own interests aside to help a neighbor. Please just come." So I went. The annual meeting was held in the community center, a large room that was packed with residents. I recognized some faces from Dorothy's party, but there were many people I had never met. Daniel gave a speech about the past year, acknowledging the mistakes that had been made and the progress that had been achieved. Then he called me up to the front of the room. "This award is for someone who exemplifies what it means to be a good neighbor," Daniel said as I stood awkwardly beside him. Marcus Vance put himself at risk, faced harassment and legal threats, all because he was trying to help someone in need. He reminds us that being part of a community means more than just following rules. It means caring about the people around us. The room erupted in applause. I was handed a plaque with my name engraved on it and the words "Community Hero." It was embarrassing and touching at the same time. Dorothy came up and gave me a big hug, which got even more applause. Then, to my surprise, about a dozen other residents came forward, each one sharing a brief story about how the changes in the HOA over the past year had improved their lives. One woman talked about how the new board had helped her when she was struggling with medical bills. A young couple described how the community had rallied around them when their house was damaged in a fire. An elderly man thanked the HOA for organizing regular check-ins with older residents to make sure they were doing okay. It was clear that Maple Heights had transformed from a place focused on rules and property values into an actual community focused on people. And while I could not take credit for all of that, I was proud to have played a small part in catalyzing that change. After the ceremony, I stayed for the reception. People came up to talk to me, to thank me, to share their own stories about dealing with difficult HOA situations. It was fascinating and somewhat depressing to hear how common these problems were, but there were also hopeful stories. People told me about HOAs that worked well, that genuinely improved their communities and helped neighbors support each other. It was not all bad. It was just that the bad cases, like what happened with Patricia, tended to get all the attention. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, I found myself standing outside the community center with Dorothy and her sister. The spring evening was warm and pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of flowering trees. "Thank you for coming tonight," Dorothy said. "I know this kind of attention probably makes you uncomfortable." "A little," I admitted, "but I am glad I came. It is good to see how things have changed here. All because you refused to back down," she said. "All because you insisted on doing what was right, even when it was difficult." "I was just doing my job," I said, repeating what had become my standard response. "No," Dorothy said firmly. "You were being a good person. There is a difference. Lots of people do their jobs. Not everyone has the courage to stand up for what is right when faced with opposition." I did not know what to say to that. I had never thought of myself as particularly courageous. I had just been frustrated and stubborn, unwilling to let someone like Patricia push me around. But maybe Dorothy was right. Maybe courage was not about grand, heroic gestures. Maybe it was about the everyday choice to do what was right, even when it was inconvenient or difficult or got you in trouble. "Thank you," I finally said. "That means a lot." Dorothy smiled and patted my arm. "Now get home. I am sure you have an early morning tomorrow." She was right about that. I had a job scheduled for 6 in the morning, clearing some land for a new housing development. It was going to be a long day. As I drove home that night, the plaque sitting on the passenger seat beside me, I thought about how strange life could be. A year ago, I had been standing in the cold, arguing with an irate HOA president while trying to clear a road for an ambulance. Now, I was a community hero with a fancy plaque and a story that had become local legend. But the thing I was most proud of was not the recognition or the settlement money or even the policy changes that had come from the whole mess. What I was most proud of was that Dorothy Mitchell was alive and well, hosting parties and organizing her neighbors and enjoying her life. That was what mattered. That was what made all the frustration and legal hassles and confrontations worthwhile. I had helped save a life, and in doing so, I had helped transform a community. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my driveway. It was from Chief Morrison. "Saw the news coverage of the ceremony tonight. Well deserved, Marcus. Let me buy you a beer sometime." I smiled and typed back a quick response. "Sounds good, Chief." Inside my house, I found a spot on the wall for the plaque, right next to my various business licenses and certifications. It looked a bit out of place among all the official documents, but somehow that felt right. I cracked open a beer and sat on my back porch, looking out at the dark shapes of the mountains in the distance. Asheville was a good place, filled with good people. Sure, there were exceptions like Patricia, people who got too caught up in rules and power, but they were the minority. Most people, I had learned, just wanted to live their lives, take care of their families, and help their neighbors when they could. Most people understood that community was about more than property values and covenant enforcement. It was about connection, compassion, and caring for one another. The whole experience had reaffirmed my faith in people, oddly enough. Yes, I had encountered someone who put petty concerns above human life. But I had also encountered so many others who had stood up for what was right, from Chief Morrison to Officers Reynolds and Chen to Daniel Morton to Dorothy herself. And in the end, that was the real story. Not the conflict with Patricia, but the way the community had come together to resolve that conflict and build something better in its wake. I finished my beer and headed inside to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new jobs, new opportunities to help people. That was the life I had chosen, and despite everything, I would not have it any other way. The bulldozer sat in my equipment yard, cleaned and serviced and ready for the next emergency call. Because there would be another emergency, another situation where people needed help. And when that call came, I would be ready. Just like I had been ready that cold morning in Maple Heights when an HOA president tried to stop me from saving a life, and I refused to back down.